quote former US President, the late John F. Kennedy, who once famously said, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. Trump may perhaps want to borrow a leaf out of the book of this illustrious predecessor. On that note, Israel has vowed to hit all nuclear sites in Iran. The United States' latest position is there's no scope of negotiations with Iran, while Iran has made it clear that it will not show the Zionists any mercy whatsoever. Israel continues to maintain that Khamenei's death will end the conflict. The United States has said that it will decide on Iran's action in the next 2 weeks, and Iran says that the very fact that America has entered the war exposes Israel's weakness. Israel, on the other hand, has said that it does not need a green light from the United States to strike Iran. The US is still weighing its options on whether or not it must strike Iran. Iran, on the other hand, has refused to budge either. But the question is that will United States get involved at all? It already has partially. While the response so far has been wishy-washy, here's why it may get involved. Because the United States wants to protect Israeli security and deter Iranian escalation. It would also look to prevent nuclear escalation to the war. Moreover, a key reason why it could possibly get its hands dirty is to protect its bases and assets in the region. The United States also would be looking to safeguard its Gulf allies and oil routes. The reasons why the United States might choose to keep its distance are the Trump cabinet, which is much less hawkish compared to his predecessors. While China and Russia have called for de-escalation, things must change if US gets involved with the former duo backing Iran. Furthermore, there are congressional limits on the extent to which US could act. Then there's also the risk of a wide regional conflict. And Trump's biggest challenge would be to choose someone else's war over his own MAGA vision. Remember, that was the promise that ensured his victory. While the United States makes up its mind, the escalation in the Middle East continues unabated. In Iran, the Weapons Research Center has been hit in Tehran. Whether or not Fordo has been hit remains unclear. Pashan, Arak, nuclear complex, the Ardakan, the Sagan, the Isfahan and Natanz all have been hit so far. A majority of nuclear facilities in Iran, of course, have already been targeted. However, Bushehr has not been hit, and an update on this entire mine remains unclear. While suspense and uncertainty looms large about how the conflict would pan out, what cannot be overlooked at this moment is a threat Iran is currently posing. For one, is the patron of Hezbollah, a Shia Islamist group behind attacks in Syria, Iraq and Israel. It continues to back Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Sunni Islamist groups targeting Israel and even the West allies. Its Quds force exports terror via proxy militia like Kataib, Hezbollah and Houthis. Iran even backed the Taliban during United States operations in Afghanistan and harbored al-Qaeda leaders including Saif al-Adel and Osama bin Laden's family members. So if US does get involved, here's what would be on its target, as is also being demanded by Israel: Fordo fuel enrichment plant, Khojar missile production complex, the IRGC command centers, uranium stockpile and centrifuge sites near Natanz and Karach, cyber warfare divisions, radar jamming stations, all of them. On that note, let me also bring in my guests today. I am joined in by Professor Brahma Chelani, who's a strategic affairs expert, Major Manik Jolly, strategic affairs expert, and Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh, who's the director of Diplo House, Joshua Huntman, who's an Israeli strategist and advisor to the hostages kin. Joshua, if I may begin with you, what is Israel's response to this ambivalence that is prevailing on the part of the United States President Donald Trump?
So thank you for having me. I mean, first of all, the Americans have been with Israel throughout their history from October the 7th, which, let's remember, was on behalf of Iran. You know, Iran declared war against Israel on October the 7th and has been attacking Israel since, from Hamas, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, from the Shia militias in Iraq, from the Houthis, and of course, waves of ballistic missiles coming from Iran itself. Iran is the greatest threat to regional security and world security. And this isn't Israel's war. This is America's war. This is Britain's war. This is India's war. This is a war for the free world right now. We have to remember, Iran stones women in the street. It spreads its Islamofascism around the region. It's an expansionist, colonialist.
Okay. But Joshua, when you say it is, when you are
stopped.
saying that it is the United States war, then why start something where you're not sure you'll be getting assistance from a country that you're blaming or rather attributing the cause for this entire conflict?
Well, we are working together every single day. They're helping us knock out Iranian ballistic missiles on a daily basis. The coordination between Israel and America is closer than ever, and Iran knows it. You have to remember, Israel, in the eyes of the Iranian theocratic regime, is the little Satan. It is Britain and America who are the mid-sized and the great Satans. India and the free world must stand with Israel right now in this historic war. There has never been a more important war against the evils of fascism since World War II. And slowly, the rest of the world are quietly, including, by the way, moderate Sunni Arabs. They're realizing it and they're joining with us.
Hamid Raza, I want to bring you in on this point because remember, Israel has made it amply clear that this war is not against the Iranians. It's against the Iranian regime. So first of all, the key question right now, nobody knows answers to is what is endgame Iran? Yes, but what is it that Iranians want? The sense I'm getting from the pro-democracy activists, from the human rights activists, is that they want an end to Khomeini's regime.
There's something in the world that the Israelis are not aware of, that which is international regime and international norms. That international norms and laws says that a country which is attacked by another entity has the right to self-defense. And Iran is using that right now. It is defending itself against the armed attacks of the Israeli regime. And since I respect your audience, I would say that if free world means killing nearly 60,000 of women and children and people in Gaza, yes, Iran is not supporting that free world. Of course it does not. Because the Israelis are committing genocide in Gaza, and Hezbollah, Hamas, Yemen, all of them are supporting people of Palestine. Yes, we are proud of supporting Palestinians because they are fighting for their lands. Like us, that we are defending our land. The Israeli regime has carried out strikes against Iran.
Okay.
And unlike what they say, they have killed civilians in Iran.
Stay with me. Gentlemen, stay with me. I'll have to quickly go across to our CNN correspondent, Karen Kaifa, who's joining me live from the White House. Karen, good to have you here. How has Israel responded to US President Trump's 2-week negotiation window?
Well, there really hasn't been any relenting, and Israel and Iran continue to trade strikes overnight, showing no signs of letting up in what's now been an 8-day conflict. President Trump is scheduled to meet with his national security team a little bit, just about a half an hour from now here at the White House, so they can assess the situation and see what has developed overnight.
With Europe and Iran set for the first high-level talks since the start of this conflict, shed more light on the timing of Donald Trump's decision.
Yeah, you know, we were getting a lot of reports here in Washington that President Trump was moving close to a decision. There were talks, sources were saying that he had been reviewing plans for a possible strike on Iran, and it seemed to be moving in that direction. And when we got that statement from White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt yesterday, it kind of put all of that on pause. Now, President Trump likes to use that 2-week deadline time frame for a lot of things, right? So to say that we will have any kind of decision in 2 weeks from now, or that he'll actually wait those 2 weeks, that's obviously something that from an unpredictable president is really hard to gauge. But at least for now, the diplomatic community seeing a little bit of breathing room here, right? You've got Britain and Germany and the UK scheduled to sit down with Iran today for very important meetings. So certainly a little bit of breathing room when it comes to a decision about the US getting involved here.
Karen, it's interesting that you mentioned that 2-week deadline and the president's fondness for that 2-week deadline, because this is not the first that the US president has quoted a 2-week time frame. Take us through the past instances when the US president has quoted a 2-week deadline.
Yeah, we've heard this before, and reporters noted that yesterday in the White House briefing when Karoline Leavitt gave that statement that a decision would be made within the next 2 weeks. This is a time frame that the president likes to throw out there, right? When previously asked if he could trust Vladimir Putin, for example, he had given the answer, I'll let you know within 2 weeks. We've heard that come up in foreign affairs. We've heard it come up with infrastructure and domestic policy. So again, this is not a president who typically adheres to a timeline or does things in the traditional way that a U.S. president has done in the past. So to think that, oh, there's 2 weeks of breathing room here for negotiation, that's not a hard and fast deadline here. And so again, everybody around the globe really is waiting to see just exactly what the U.S. does here.
All right. Many thanks to you, Karen. Thank you for joining in on Brass Tacks. It was a pleasure speaking to you. On that note, I quickly go back to my guests. Professor Chilani, if I could bring you in on that entire conversation I was just having with our CNN White House correspondent. The first high-level talks all set to take place between Iran and EU. Do you think that could have a role to play in this entire 2-week diplomacy window that the president has announced?
Iran-EU talks may actually not begin because Iran is saying now that it cannot be talking to foreign officials when aggression is on. But the point is this: Israel would like the US to get involved in the bombing campaign against Iran very soon, because this war is costing Israel hundreds of millions of dollars, including, in fact, tens of millions of dollars every day. Economic activity in Israel is at a standstill. Airspace of Israel is closed. There are no flights going to Israel or out of Israel. So the longer the US takes to get involved directly in the war, the greater the costs for Israel. The second more important point is this, that the Israeli Prime Minister's own National Security Advisor has admitted on Israeli television that Iran's nuclear program cannot be destroyed by military means alone. He suggested that the only way Iran's nuclear program can be dismantled is through nuclear diplomacy. But nuclear diplomacy has been derailed by Israel's attack. Today, Iran is already one of the world's most sanctioned countries. Now it's facing a terrible assault. A lot of its nuclear infrastructure is being destroyed. So it might believe that it has little to lose by emulating the example of North Korea. North Korea in 2003 left the NPT, kicked out the inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and then 3 years later, it detonated a nuclear device and became a de facto nuclear weapon state. In other words, Israel's attack might compel Iran to actually go nuclear. In other words, Israel's war, and especially if the Americans join, they'll make it even doubly sure that Iran will go nuclear.
Major Marek Jolly, have we created a catch-22 situation? Because that is what appears to be, as Professor was also highlighting, because there's certainly going to be a widening of the conflict if there's a direct US involvement, if there is no direct US involvement, and if there is still room for diplomacy. Is the US in a position to undo everything that's been done so far?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Akanksha. So, what I'll say is it's not a catch-22 situation. If Iran had the capability to go nuclear by now, they would have. You cannot push somebody to go nuclear over a week just because somebody's attacked on you. The validity of Israel attack and how they suffered through 7th October and their successive attacks, let's keep that aside. Objectively, I would say the 2 weeks notice that the President Trump has given, it only means two things. One, there is a light of end of the tunnel which they see. Generally in military operations, you don't give such definite deadlines till the time you are very sure the next 14 days we are achieving something. And America may not, because it will have huge global implications. if America steps in directly.
True.
Although they are supporting Israel the way they can. But I think if they are saying 15 days, it means there is something that they have on horizon that they may not need to step. Second, I do feel that if this gets, if there's a diplomatic approach is achieved by EU interfering or the two countries talking to each other, the US would want to take a credit somewhere somehow, which they have been longing for, whether it was Russia, Ukraine, or India, Pakistan. I think that is a route they do not want to close, just so that they come across as somebody who's bringing peace to the region. And finally, on the relentless attacks which the two countries are going on, I think neither of them would go ahead and listen to anybody else.
True.
You can have, I mean, the EU can interfere, or India can talk, or
I think
US can
that's a
talk.
very critical
Yeah.
point, because I want to
Yeah.
bring in Hamid Reza on that note. Hamid Reza, the key question is, even if the EU manages to bring Iran to that talking table, the fact of the matter is, how much of an influence can EU wield over the US president, who's almost behaved like a mad king during G7 when we've seen the kind of barbed wires that were traded, or rather accusations hurled at the French president.
For Iran, neither the Americans nor the Europeans are trustworthy anymore, because the Europeans were supposed to keep JCPOA alive by instincts, and after that they did not do that, and later they ignited actually the trigger mechanism in JCPOA. And just last week, just before the Israeli aggression against Iran, they issued a resolution in IAEA, after which Mr. Grossi said that there has been no evidence for breach of the regulations of the IAEA, of course. So they politicized IAEA, and they are not trustworthy for Iran anymore. And the Americans, we were in the middle of the nuclear talks with the Americans, and they have actually stopped it. They were abetting the attack against Iran. And your guest just mentioned that the Americans have been closely involved in the attack, and they were aware of that, and they decided to kill the negotiations and adhere to military force. So there is no place for negotiations regarding this conflict right now. It's with the either Americans or the Europeans, and there is no fruit in that, because they are not going to make any real commitments. And then when there is no commitments, there is no deal to be reached by the two sides.
Joshua, can we use military means to make a country or oblige a country into giving up their nuclear program? Of course, Iran continues to accuse Israeli airstrikes of being a violation against international law, and they have, of course, maintained that their nuclear program...
Iran doesn't accuse, it is international law.
Pardon me?
Iran doesn't accuse. It's the law that says that Israel is...
Okay. Let Joshua come in on that. Joshua, how do you weigh in on what's being said over here, that it is not an accusation? What you are doing is a blatant violation of international law. And not to forget the fact that Iran has maintained that so far their nuclear program was within limits and that it was for clean purposes.
I mean, that's an absolute joke. In May, the IAEA report said that Iran's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium had swelled to more than 400 kilograms, enough fissile material for about 10 nuclear weapons. Okay, there is no one in the world that says you should be enriching uranium to over 60%. And there's another bigger question there. Why does Iran even need a peaceful nuclear program, which they don't have? It is a nation awash with oil and gas. They don't have a problem with energy. These nuclear weapons are to do what their leaders have been saying to do for many years, which is to wipe the one and only Jewish state off the map, a nation that cannot respect its own citizens, a nation that massacres 600,000. The gentleman talked about genocide. Iran backed Assad's genocide of 600,000 Syrians. They backed Hezbollah. They backed Hamas, that came and raped and kidnapped babies and children and mothers and fathers on October the 7th.
Okay.
When we're talking about international law...
Reza, how do you respond to that?
Finish my point.
Okay.
On October the 7th, Iran declared war on Israel when they raped and murdered our citizens. And this is just one other level of our self-defense. We will not let the most dangerous regime in the world get the most dangerous weapons.
Ahmed Reza, how do you respond? Because there's also the criticism coming in that if today Iran is allowed to pursue that program, there are going to be several other nations that will also be following suit.
No. IAEA has confirmed, and even in NSA in the United States have confirmed that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear bomb. 60% enrichment doesn't mean a nuclear bomb. We are talking about facts, not just assessments by Israeli regime. 60% could be used for other purposes. It's not necessarily used for military, and it's not capable of military use, actually, for 60%. And the regime that has attacked several neighbors, several countries, is the Israeli regime. Iran has never attacked anyone. And Lebanon, Yemen, Palestine, Syria, Iran, Iraq are the countries that Israelis have attacked. So let's look at the facts. Who is more dangerous to the world than the Israeli regime, which is not abiding by the international law, which is not a signatory to NPT,
or
which
an
has nuclear
Islamo-fascist
weapons,
expansionist
and it is not
One at a
responsible.
time, one at a time, one at a
Everyone.
time. Gentlemen, please give me time. I'm running short of time now. I need to wrap up. So, Professor Chalani, I want you to weigh in on the criticism of US interventionism that's also being applied to the Israeli demand of US joining in this entire conflict. Many are giving examples of Afghanistan or the Iraq war. Do you think these are fair examples?
First, Iran is not an immediate neighbor of Israel. Between Israel and Iran, there are several geographic buffers: Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. India is the only country in the world that's wedged between two nuclear-armed, closely aligned adversaries, China and Pakistan. And Iran is just 500 nautical miles away from India. The other aspect we should not forget, which is actually an irony, is that the International Atomic Energy Agency, in a report released just a day before Israel's attack on Iran, said there was no evidence that it found of an undeclared Iranian nuclear weapons program.
Okay.
And the US intelligence has repeatedly asserted in recent days that they still do not think Iran has decided to make a nuclear bomb. Yet, Donald Trump is thinking of intervening in this war. It will be so paradoxical that a US president whose own intelligence agencies, 17 of them, have unanimously said that they do not see any concrete sign of Iran actually moving toward the manufacture of nuclear weapons. If the president were to actually wage war against Iran, that would be so paradoxical.
Major Manik Jolly, how do you respond to the concern that's being shared by Professor Chalani? You know, I do somewhere share his concern of how other countries, primarily the ones who are geographically in the proximity of Iran and Israel, are inadvertently going to get sucked in whether or not they like it.
So let me ask you, Akanksha. When Pakistan did a terror attack on us, did we not strike Pakistan? So what takes away the right from Israel to answer it back? Somebody who's causing,
No, but we've always maintained that it's a bilateral issue. We've not asked other countries to join in that conflict.
So, yes, perfectly. So I would say that Israel, by extension, has always been a combination Israel-America. So you cannot take reality away from the fact. Their entire weapons.
But then by that logic, one should not object to Russia or China stepping forward to Iran's rescue as well.
So once America steps in directly, till now, let's say it's indirect support in terms of weapon, tactics, data, GPS access and all that. But once, that is what the 2 weeks are for. When they know when they step in, the other guys will also step in. So that is what they're trying to avoid. That 2 weeks, if you can achieve something, that is maybe denuclearize Iran or maybe reach a diplomatic consensus, we would avoid maybe a potential world war. So this timeline even might extend because everybody knows if America steps in directly, a lot of other countries would get sucked into it, like you said. But I do believe in the fact that if America does believe that its ally has been attacked on its home ground and it's going ahead attacking the country which organized one of the biggest terror attacks, I think everybody has the right to answer to
All
that.
right.
I do not take that away.
I think unanimously we all can agree that the US president has never really managed anything in that 2-week window. Here's hoping for once he'll make an exception and perhaps bring the two parties at the talking table. Many thanks to you gentlemen for joining in on Brass Tacks. It was a pleasure having you on the show. And with that, we're slipping into a quick break. Stay tuned for more news and updates shall follow on the other side.
Co-presented by... This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
We're learning that Australia has suspended operations at its embassy in Tehran and told its officials and their dependents to leave Iran amid the deteriorating security situation. In a statement on Friday, the Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong has said that the country's ambassador to Iran would stay in the region to help with Australia's response to the Iran-Israel conflict. So now Australia is getting its diplomats out of Iran in the midst of this escalating tension. This is a direct missive that's come out of Australia where they have mentioned that the diplomats along with their wards, their family members are to move out of Iran along with their dependents. And this, of course, is in the wake of the deteriorating security situation. My colleague Akanksha Swaroop is with us with more details. Yes, Akanksha.
Right. Griha, the Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong has made this announcement that it's going to be extremely difficult for Australians to leave Iran because the airspace is shut. So even though they are looking at evacuating Australians from Iran, the challenge, of course, remains the airspace. We've seen how this is also posing a trouble for air travel across the world, something that's been flagged off by Air India as far as India is also concerned. But coming to Australians, there are about 2,000 Australians in Iran and their families in Iran, and around 1,300, in fact 1,200 are in Israel, who are looking at evacuations. So as we speak, it's not just Australians in Iran, but also in Israel that Australia is looking to get evacuated. They are very much aware that it is a very difficult procedure, and they are now looking at increasing the capacity to assist. But the reality on the ground is, of course, extremely unstable. We've already seen the kind of challenges that have been posed to India in the evacuation of all of those Kashmiri students. So the security situation, obviously very difficult. The airspace remaining shut. We'll have to see what is the kind of assistance that the Iranian regime can provide at the moment, given that they are very much absorbed in the conflict. But what they have done is also deploy their own consular staff to Azerbaijan from Tehran. And so, there are alternate routes that are being considered. India considered the Armenian route. Australia is looking at Azerbaijan.
Okay.
It's the closest land crossing available to them. So this is the latest that we're learning.
Thank you so much for that, Akanksha. With that, let's take a look at this next report by CNN's Fred and photojournalist Claudia Otto, as they are the first Western journalists in Tehran since the conflict with Israel began this Friday. Take a look at their ground report.
We're inside the Iranian state broadcasting company, IRIB, which was hit by an Israeli airstrike a couple of days ago, and you can see the damage is absolutely massive. I'm standing in the atrium right now, but if you look around, this whole area has been completely destroyed. All of the offices, all of the technology that they have inside here, the broadcast technology, everything has been rendered pretty much useless. All right, so we're going to go inside the building now. They have told us that we need to be very careful because obviously there might still be unexploded parts of bombs in here or something like that. What we see here is the actual studio where an Iranian state TV anchor was sitting and reading the news when the strike hit. You can see here that is an anchor desk right there. And of course, when it happened, the anchor was reading the news and then all of a sudden there was a thud. The studio went black at the beginning. She got up and left, but then later apparently came back and finished the newscast and is now being hailed as a champion of Iranian media. Some of the main bulk of the explosion must have been here because this place is absolutely charred. And if we look back over there, that actually seems to be the main part of what was the newsroom, with a lot of the desks, computers, printers, phones. You can see how much heat must have been emitted by the impact and by the explosion. The phones that they had here are molten. Here also, the keys molten, this screen, and there's actually someone's lunch still at their desk, standing here, which probably they would have been wanting to eat until they had to evacuate the building. You can see there's a spoon here that's also been...
Ahmedabad Civil Hospital is used to seeing tears, despair, death. Yet the images of 12 June 2025 shook even the hardened ones in the medical establishment here. 241 passengers on board AI-171 that had taken off just a minute ago from the Ahmedabad airport for Gatwick in United Kingdom crashed into the BJMC, the BJ Medical College hostel premises. Doctors who believed they were safe in their staff quarters or in their hostel mess did not even get a chance, as many were charred to death. Exactly what happened in that minute and a half? How really is the family which has lost their loved one coping? What is it that the survivors are saying? Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to piece together one of the worst aviation crashes in recent history.
इलेक्ट्रिशियन का थोड़ा काम था, वो करने के लिए गया था। जस्ट 2 मिनट हुई, मैं वहाँ से निकला, उसके बाद में तुरंत ही बहुत बड़ा धमाका हो गया। उसके बाद में तो मुझे खुद को कुछ पता नहीं चला। वो हिसाब से मैं भी वैसे घबरा के गया इतना, तो वहीं से निकल गया, भागा मैं वहीं से।
जैसे प्लेन हुआ, मेरे सामने जो प्लेन हुआ वहाँ पे चिल्लाने की पैसेंजर की आवाज़, बचाओ बचाओ, पर वो आवाज़ सिर्फ 10 मिनट की थी, क्योंकि 10 मिनट में पूरा प्लेन राख हो गया था।
हमारे सिविल डिफेंस टीम ने मिलकर, हमने मिलकर समथिंग 15-20 लाश हमने निकाली होगी सर, और एक छोटी बच्ची भी थी सर। उसको देखते ही सर मुझे थोड़ा वो हो गया कि बच्चे की लाश देखी तो हमारे को थोड़ा अंदर से नर्वस हो गए कि बहुत ख़राब हुआ ये।
This was the mess of the undergraduate medical doctors at the undergraduate medical college. The uneaten food reminds you of what really happened here at lunchtime. The unfortunate doctors could not even finish their meals, and there are such plates all across this area. The glass window panes have been all broken. And why does this happen? Because on the other side, I'll just show you. On the other side is that wall that has been smashed out because of that aircraft, the tail part of that aircraft crashing through the gate of this hostel mess. Here you see, I'm just going to show you. These were belongings of passengers who were traveling. Their suitcases were thrown open and all their clothes have been strewn around in this mess. If I walk further, this is only debris now. And there is a very strong fume, which I don't know from where it is coming. A lot of the DGCA investigating team people, okay, I'm walking over pillows and I'm walking over belongings of people. This is what remains. There's also toiletries. There's toiletries and cosmetics kits that is lying around. There's some packets of chips and umbrella, and this is the Samsonite suitcase, someone's unfortunate suitcase. Look at the kind of impact. This is what remains of the suitcase, just broken into pieces. Another, woman handbag, the remains of a bag. And I'm just going to walk ahead. Like I told you, it's getting difficult to breathe here. There's some kind of a fume that is all around. This is what really triggered this kind of a mess. This is the part of the aircraft which is remains. This is the tire side of it, and the part. It is an investigation area now, and we are being asked to move out. So we'll walk down from the first floor to the ground floor of this mess building, because the DGCA team from Delhi has arrived. They want to sanitize the area. They want to carry out the investigation. And as I'm walking out, once again you'll see the impact of the crash on this building. Many people who were eating in that mess lost their lives. They were there for their meal and they could not survive because one aircraft came crashing down. I'm walking out from this debris area as the police and the investigating team from Delhi, from Bombay, and also from Ahmedabad takes over. A shoe, somebody's shoe, some passenger's shoe, or perhaps a doctor's shoe is also lying around here. If I go further, there are such belongings all over. And these scenes tell you of the horror. That 1.5 minutes from the point of takeoff, where you message people saying taking off and I'll message when I land, to here, everything over in just 1.5 minutes. The crash of the Boeing at Ahmedabad ensured that the debris were strewn all around. This is the wing. What you're seeing here is the wing part of the aircraft. The point from where it was attached to the main body of the aircraft is all black. It has been burnt to pieces because of perhaps being connected to the fuel section. So that's all black. And then I can see some machinery below the wing as well. Wires jutting out. This is the wingspan that you usually see. If you have a window seat in the aircraft, you would perhaps see this part attached to the wings. And then there are these 3 letters, A, N, B. It was a Dreamliner. And that perhaps is what, the initial, some of them are visible, others are charred. That is what it denotes. So all around, this particular area of the medical college, there are these evidence, parts of the debris that is essential. The black box is quite important. The black box will perhaps tell the investigators exactly what happened in that 1.5 minutes.
आपका घर पास ही में है, क्या हुआ था कल दोपहर में जब आप वहाँ पहुँचे थे? तो
कल दोपहर में मैं वहाँ से बाइक लेके मेरे अपने सिविल अस्पताल जॉब में आ रहा था। वहाँ पे मैं आगे निकला। मैं जैसे आगे निकला वहाँ से प्लेन क्रैश हुआ। तो 5 मिनट थोड़ा होता लेट में तो प्लेन मेरे ऊपर भी आके गिर जाता। आगे मैंने देखा प्लेन क्रैश हुआ, बड़ा धमाका हुआ, पूरे 5 किलोमीटर के विस्तार पे धुआं हो गया। मैं वहाँ से मेरी बाइक सही सलामत रखी, फिर मैं भागते भागते घटनास्थल पे आया। जैसे घटनास्थल पे पहुँचा तो मेरे सामने एक बेंजी का मस्तक आके गिरा। वो मैं देख के ऐसा हो गया कि क्या हो रहा है इधर। फिर आगे जाके देखा तो एक मेरे सामने गार्ड, जो वहाँ पे गार्ड थे, वो राख हो गए जल के। फिर आगे देखा तो 4 व्हीलर 2 व्हीलर सब जल रहे थे। मन में एक डर था कि 4 व्हीलर के 2 व्हीलर ब्लास्ट होकर मेरे पर ना गिरे, पर थोड़ी हिम्मत की के आगे गए। जिसको बचाना था वो उसको बचाए। ऊपर 5वें माले पे डॉक्टर बचाओ चिल्ला रहे थे। वहाँ पे फायर ब्रिगेड की टीम घटनास्थल पे आ गई थी। उन्होंने हमने सबने जाके अंदर से आके बचाया।
This mess became the graveyard for at least 4 doctors and an unsuspecting cook with her 2-year-old granddaughter.
मेरी वाइफ 1 बजे जैसा टिफिन सब भर के निकल गए हैं, और ये जो आज 1:30 बजे के बाद जो हुआ है, पर वहाँ हम इतने बजे तक पहुँच नहीं पाए। तब तक तो जाए तो वहाँ पे सब जल के राख हो गया है। तो अभी कल रात से भी ढूंढ रहे हैं, तो कुछ पता नहीं चल पाया है।
जो हॉस्टल है ना, छोकरे कॉलेज में पढ़ने आते हैं ना, रोटी पकाने जाती है मेरी औरत, तो हम टिफिन भर के निकल गए थे। तो बाद में 1:30 बजे बन गया इधर, तो छोकरे को देखने के लापता है। औरत में छोकरी 2 बरस की बच्ची है।
कितनी बड़ी बच्ची है?
2 साल की बच्ची है।
और कहीं उसको कुछ पता नहीं चल
रहा है। फोटो
दिखाइए, फोटो दिखाइए। ये आपकी बेटी है और ये आपकी वाइफ मिसेज है आपकी, और ये आपकी बेटी है, और इनका कहीं पता नहीं चल पा रहा है। वहाँ मेस में क्या कह रहे हैं?
रोटी पका रहे हैं, डॉक्टर के क्या टिफिन कर रहे हैं 10 साल।
अच्छा, ओके, सो दिस इज वन केस। यहाँ डीएनए कुछ देने का बोला है?
72 लाख का दिया है, 72 लाख का
दिया है। हाँ, दिया है। So this is one family which is given its DNA sample, waiting to know about where their loved one is.
On the same pavement opposite the post-mortem room, Suresh Bhai Patni's agonizing wait continued. His 15-year-old son Akash became a collateral damage as the wing of the crashing aircraft fell on the tea stall, the ball of fire charring him beyond recognition.
आपने डीएनए के लिए ब्लड सैंपल दे दिया, तो अब डॉक्टर क्या कह रहे हैं?
अभी सबका टेस्ट होगा, तो जब टेस्ट होगा तो आपको फोन कर देगा, बोला क्या आपकी बॉडी आके ले जाना।
तो आज शाम तक भी देंगे, ऐसा कुछ नहीं कह रहे हैं?
अभी फोन ही हम पूछने नहीं गए, तो हम कहाँ से फोन करेंगे, बोले अभी इतनी सारी बॉडी है।
हाँ।
अपने तो नहीं ले लेगा, वो भी जैसे आएगा वैसे ही लेगा ना।
आपको पता कैसे चला कि इतना बड़ा हादसा हो गया? आप तो वहाँ थे नहीं ना, आप अपनी गाड़ी लेके निकले थे।
जो धुआं निकला ना, तो धुआं तो कोई छोटा तो नहीं निकला होगा, बहुत बड़ा निकला था।
पता तो चलता ही ना बाजू में,
तो बाजू में 1 किलोमीटर ही दूर था, तो दूर नहीं था, 1 के 1.5 किलोमीटर ही। तो धुआं निकला, तो अपने एरिया के अंदर धुआं निकलेगा तो फिर जाना तो पड़े ना। मैं पैसेंजर वहाँ पे निकला, सब जलाकार ही थी, सब वहाँ पे सब भर रहे थे। उसमें मेरी किटली पे आके, जहाँ मेरी बीबी थी, बच्चा था, वहाँ पे विमान का परखा वहाँ पे पड़ा, बच्चे के गई, बच्चा जल गया वहाँ पे, बीबी थोड़ी जल गई, अभी एडमिट है। 50% उसका भी डॉक्टर बता रहे हैं। अभी देखते हैं अभी क्या जवाब दे रहे हैं।
होश में है? आपसे बात हुई है?
बात तो हुई, कल हुई, आज भी सुबह जाकर बात तो की है। डॉक्टर भी बोले कि 50% है, हम अच्छा कर देगा बोले।
उनको मालूम है कि आपका बेटा नहीं रहा?
नहीं,
उनको भी बताया नहीं।
कैसे बता सकते हैं? उसके पहले तो वही पहले चले जा रहे हैं।
इकलौता बेटा था आपका?
दूसरा है, बड़ा है।
और बहुत ही समझदार था, मैंने फोटो देखी उसको, लोग बता रहे थे समझदार था।
अगर मेरे परिवार के अंदर वही एक लड़का, मेरे वाला लड़का था, वही था बस। कोई भी मेहमान आवे, कोई भी परिवार के अंदर किसी को मुँह चरा के बाद नहीं हंसते रहे, तो जो हो गया तो हो गया।
किसी से आपकी मुलाकात हुई क्या? प्रधानमंत्री भी आए थे, गृह मंत्री भी आए थे, या मुख्यमंत्री?
यहाँ पे बच्चा, यहाँ पे ध्यान रखो कि मंत्री को मैं भेगा था, न जाऊँ पहले यहाँ पे जब मेरी बीवी बच्चे का ध्यान रखो कि उनके बाद मैं मुलाकात करने जाऊँ।
कोई कॉम्पनसेशन की बात भी किसी ने नहीं किया? So this is outside the postmortem wing of the civil hospital. 15-year-old boy of this father was charred to death just because he was resting at the mobile chai shop that was run by his mother. The mother also has 50% burn injuries. She's battling for her life. And such scenes are evident all across the postmortem wing. These are all family members, each of them waiting to hear some good news about those who have been injured and who are undergoing treatment, or for a closure for those who have lost their loved ones. That's the scene from the civil hospital here in Ahmedabad. Heart-rending, heart-wrenching.
More than 250 people died in the crash, 241 on board, others at the crash site.
सर, आज आप लोग यहाँ पर आए हैं बॉडी लेने के लिए, तो यहाँ पे क्या रिस्पांस मिला है और क्या प्रक्रिया बता रहे हैं?
मेरे को पहले ऐसा बोला था कि आज लेंगे, फिर हमें आधे रास्ते से आ गए थे, तो वो बोल रहे थे आज देंगे या कल देंगे, कोई कंफर्मेशन नहीं है। फिर यहाँ पे आए तो पता चला कि आज नहीं देंगे, कल देंगे।
आपके कौन रिलेटिव थे सर?
मेरे बड़े भाई।
बड़े भाई?
हाँ। वो उनकी बीबी का बेबी शावर था संडे को, तो वो सरप्राइज़ देने के लिए जा रहा था।
तो लंदन में ही रहते थे?
नहीं, मेरी भी उसकी बच्ची लंदन में ही रहती है, हम दोनों भाई यहाँ जॉइंट में ही रहते हैं।
तो उस दिन आखिरी में क्या बात हुई, अगर कुछ याद है?
आखिरी में मैं एयरपोर्ट छोड़ने के लिए आया था, फिर छोड़ के मैं उसको मैं निकल गया था रास्ते में, तो खेला तक पहुंचा मैं, गोबलेज करके गांव है, वहां तक पहुंचा था, होटल पे खड़े थे। फिर वहां से मेरे पास में भी दूसरे लोग थे जो छोड़ने के लिए आए थे, तो उन्होंने ऑनलाइन न्यूज़ में देखा मोबाइल में, तो उन्होंने बताया कि ऐसा हुआ है, तो फिर हम वहाँ से ही रिटर्न आ गए, तो डायरेक्ट सिविल हॉस्पिटल में ही आए थे।
तो अभी तक डीएनए मैच हो पाया है? कुछ प्रशासन से कुछ जानकारी मिली?
वो अभी कुछ पता नहीं बोल रहे हैं
कि 2 दिन से ज़्यादा हो गया।
हाँ, वो लोगों ने 72 घंटे बोले थे, लेकिन अभी कोई जवाब नहीं है।
कैसा रिस्पांस रहा है प्रशासन का?
रिस्पांस तो अच्छा है उन लोगों का, कोई तकलीफ नहीं है।
घर पे बताया, घर पे लोगों को बताओ बेबी शार का, तो कैसे सब ले रहे हैं?
उसको मेरी बच्ची को तो पता ही नहीं था कि मेरे पापा आ रहे हैं, फिर सरप्राइज था ना, तो फिर बताना पड़ा, क्योंकि एक्सीडेंट होता तो हम नहीं बताते, लेकिन ये तो बताना पड़ता है ना।
We're here at the VJ Medical College. There's a DNA sampling collection center which has been set up. Instructions have also been issued for relatives of those who've lost their life in fire. There are notices that have been put saying that there's also a stay arrangement that has been made for those who are coming in from out of town at the circuit house. Apart from that, there's also a mention about how the blood sample reports will be available after 72 hours for those who've come in for the blood collection right here.
For many on board, the flight was the first step to a new beginning. Khushbu Rajpurohit was travelling for the first time to meet her husband after their wedding. For Yasmin Vora, a soon-to-be grandmother, the trip was to help her pregnant daughter-in-law.
उनका 9/6 का टिकट था ऑलरेडी, लेकिन ये लोग दांत की ट्रीटमेंट के लिए जो आए ना, मेरे साले का लड़का और उनकी छोटी लड़की, उनका 12 तारीख का टिकट था, तो हमने 9 का 12 कर दिया टिकट, ये साथ में एक्सटेंड किया साथ में जाने के लिए, और ये ऐसा हो गया।
तो क्या मैम पहली बार जा रही थी?
ऑलरेडी एक बार जा चुकी है, और मैं भी गया था साथ में उसके साथ, लेकिन ये इस टाइम वो अकेले जाने वाली थी, और उसके बाद 2 महीने के बाद मैं जाने वाला था 1 महीने के लिए, तो ये हादसा हो गया। मतलब मैं दोनों वाइफ प्रेग्नेंट है उनकी, मेरे दोनों लड़के की, तो उनको साथ कोई नहीं था। मतलब उस टाइम पे मेरी वाइफ की, को लड़के की मम्मी किसी की ज़रूरत पड़ती है डिलीवरी के टाइम में, तो वो लोग को वीज़ा नहीं मिला, प्रोसेस में है, तो मेरी वाइफ का मेरे पास ऑलरेडी मेरे पास वीज़ा है, तो मेरी वाइफ का टिकट मैंने कर दिया था 9 तारीख का, और मेरे जो रिलेटिव आ रहे थे उसके साथ भेजने के लिए मैंने 9 का 12 तारीख का टिकट मैंने करवाया। ये ऐसा हुआ। और मेरे घर में जो छोटे बच्चा है वहाँ पे जो रहता है ना, उसकी वाइफ का फर्स्ट डिलीवरी, मतलब फर्स्ट टाइम था उसका, तो बेबी सवार भी उसको वहाँ पे करने का था, तो वो बहुत मतलब खुश थी और जाने के लिए बहुत उसको वो था, और ये हादसा हो गया।
Amongst the deceased was Vijay Rupani. It took almost 72 hours for the DNA of former Chief Minister of Gujarat to be matched with that of his son. For many others, the wait was much longer, as extracting DNA from charred dead bodies threw up its own challenges.
While the aggrieved families struggled to make sense of destiny, Vikas Ramesh couldn't believe his luck. The sole survivor of the crash, Vikas lost his brother who was seated across the aisle from his 11A seat number. His testimony has now emerged as key evidence for investigators to understand what went wrong.
विश्वास, अगर हम जानना चाहें कि आप थोड़ा सा बता पाएं कि ये हादसा कैसे हुआ था, क्योंकि ये एक बड़ा चमत्कार है जिस तरीके से आप वहाँ से इकलौते ऐसे शख्स हैं जो जिंदा बचे।
वो मेरे नज़रों के सब सामने हुआ था। मेरे खुद को भी बिलीव नहीं होता कि मैं कैसे उसमें से जिंदा बाहर निकला, क्योंकि थोड़ा टाइम के लिए तो मेरे को लगा था कि मैं भी मरने वाला हूँ, लेकिन जब मेरी आँख खुल के मैं देखा ना, तो मुझे लगा मैं जिंदा हूँ। तो मैंने ट्राई किया, जब मेरी सीट थे वो मेरी बेल्ट निकाला, मैंने वो ट्राई किया जहाँ से निकल सकता वहाँ से, तो मैं निकल गया वहाँ से। मेरे नज़रों के सामने एयर हॉस्टल और दूसरे आंटी अंकल सभी उसमें मिस हो गए थे सभी।
अच्छा, थोड़ा सा बता पाएं, जब जैसे ही टेक ऑफ हुई फ्लाइट, क्या हुआ था और अचानक से कैसे हादसा हुआ?
टेक ऑफ के बाद 1 मिनट के अंदर ही जब टेक ऑफ हुआ ना, तो सडनली 5-10 सेकंड कैसे लगा जैसे स्टक हो गया वो। बाद में से मेरे को लगा कि कुछ हुआ। बाद में प्लेन में लाइट ऑन हो गई, ग्रीन और वाइट। बाद में वो पता नहीं, वो प्लेन टेक ऑफ ज़्यादा करने के लिए वो रेस तो बोलते हैं क्या, रेस दिया होगा ऐसा कुछ, और सीधा स्पीड में ही घुस गया जहाँ वो क्या था, वो
हॉस्टल था, एक हॉस्पिटल का।
हाँ, हॉस्टल में।
The probe team is also looking for the black box to answer some key questions. A few components of the black box were damaged in the crash and the subsequent fire. But the video of the crash, the CCTV footage and the survivor account could together give some insight into the last few seconds of the ill-fated AI-171.
जब तुम वीडियो बना रहे थे, जब ये प्लेन क्रैश हुआ, उस प्लेन का वीडियो आपने बनाया था, क्या बनाया था?
मैं गांव में रहता हूँ, इसलिए मेरे गांव से पास से विमान जाता नहीं, इसलिए मेरे कभी देखा नहीं था, इसलिए पहली बार ही अहमदाबाद आया था और अहमदाबाद से पास से विमान जा रहा था, तो मैंने लगा वीडियो उतार दूँ, मेरे दोस्त को दिखाऊंगा, ऐसा करके वीडियो उतारा था। प्लेन ऐसे ऐसे करके जा रहा था और वहाँ मैं कर रहा था कि वहाँ एयरपोर्ट है तो लैंडिंग कर रहा है, ऐसा मैंने लगा। वहाँ जाके ब्लास्ट हो गया, मैंने सोचा भी नहीं था।
हर बार जब आप यहाँ पे आते हो, ये आपने देखा कि प्लेन यहाँ से जा रहा है, तो आपने ये वीडियो बनाने का सोचा?
हाँ।
क्या दिमाग में क्या आया था कि
ये क्या हो गया, और मैं घबरा गया था।
ये प्लेन जब टूट गया तो वो क्या, फिर आपने क्या किया, ये वीडियो बना?
मैंने मेरे बहन को बताया ये क्या हुआ है।
Some of the senior doctors here at Civil Hospital Ahmedabad, it is almost like a deja vu moment from 1988 when an Indian Airlines flight, which was landing at Ahmedabad airport, had crashed, leading to death of 133 people on board. In fact, there were 135 people who were present on board that flight, and only 2 survived out of it, of which the case study of one of the person had become a remarkable story in Ahmedabad because he'd lost his daughter and wife in it, following which a couple of years back the body of this very survivor was also found in Ahmedabad. Similarly, these senior doctors now recollect that this very instance of the Ahmedabad plane crash of Air India flight Boeing 787 is very similar to that instance wherein there's only been one survivor in this case and the bodies have been charred to death.
While investigators compare evidence on ground with findings of previous crashes to seek answers, the forensic and medical teams struggle with finding the right match of mortal remains charred beyond recognition.
192 ambulances from across the state of Gujarat, 230 teams, 592 members in those teams. All of them have been tasked to transport the mortal remains of all the deceased back to their hometowns. For those international citizens who might want to take the dead bodies of their loved ones back to their countries, Air India has been asked to assist them in transportation of all these bodies.
The probe, as far as the Ahmedabad air crash is concerned, behind me the wreckage is still visible. In the ambience you can hear an aircraft taking off. It was a similar aircraft that had taken off on that fateful day as well. It crashed right here in the BJMC Medical College hostel. That's the roof of the college hostel, where the tailing of the Dreamliner is still there. The AIB, which is the Aircraft Investigation Bureau, their personnel are there on the rooftop along with forensic team. The SG team has also helped them all through this. NDRF has carried out their rescue operation, and even on the ground, this ground, if I just take a step back and zoom in on the camera, even the empty space here, you see there are forensic team members scouting around to pick up evidence, whatever evidence they can pick up from this area. So the entire focus of the probe, the black box has been recovered, but the focus of the probe is to try and ascertain, both in terms of human, forensic and also digital evidence, as to what really happened. there are eyewitnesses as well. One such eyewitness is here with me. उस दिन आपने प्रत्यक्ष देखा था प्लेन को
देखा था, क्योंकि हम वो तब टेरेस पे ही थे पूरे, मैं और मेरी वाइफ, और प्लेन की जो हवा थी इतनी स्पीड में थी, तो मेरी वाइफ तो पूरी प्लेन की हवा से गिर गई, और जब ये हुआ पेड़ से टकरा के डायरेक्ट वो कैंटीन पे गिर पड़ा, जो स्टूडेंट कैंटीन, डॉक्टर्स कैंटीन पे, और इतना बड़ा फ्लैश हुआ ना, तो आजू बाजू में तो सब ऐसा सन्नाटा हो गया, और हमको भी खुद देख भी नहीं पा रहे थे हम।
इतना तेज आग,
इतना तेज वो वहाँ ब्लास्ट हुआ था, यहाँ तक उसकी आग की विस्फोट आ रही थी।
Once again, I want to zoom in. You see those buildings there, completely black. That's the Atulya 1 to 4 quarters. That's the staff quarters, and this is the hostel area. So this is the broad area where the plane crashed. जो वीडियो बनाई गई थी, जिसमें हमने देखा है उस प्लेन को नीचे आते हुए, वो भी इसी मोहल्ले से बनाई गई थी।
नहीं, वो थोड़ा आगे से बनाई हुई है, वो यहाँ से लगभग 500-600 मीटर आगे से बनी हुई वीडियो, और जब ये प्लेन आया एकदम हमारे ऊपर, एकदम हमारी नजदीक से नीचे।
आपको एक बार को लगा अपनी जान का खतरा?
हाँ, खतरा लगा। हम तो कुछ बयान भी नहीं कर सकता, मेरे जुबान से निकल भी नहीं कि क्या हालत थी, पूरा शरीर वाइब्रेशन होने लगा था, और हम बार बार बच गए।
और अगर यहाँ प्लेन, अगर आपको लगा कि प्लेन यहाँ भी क्रैश,
हाँ, हमको तो 100, मेरे तो 99% ऐसे बच गए, हम 1 सेकंड के लिए हम बच गए, बाकी प्लेन यहीं क्रैश होने वाला था। पूरा रेसिडेंशियल एरिया है, बहुत पब्लिक यहाँ रहती है, इससे भी बड़ा हादसा हो सकता था। ये तो ड्राइवर की सूझबूझ से, पायलट की सूझबूझ से वो वहाँ गिर गया।
Yeah, so I want to show you once again. This is an empty area, you know, around, just at the back side of that, crash site. That's an empty area, and looks like that the pilot, calculated. That's what the civilians here are also saying, that the pilot calculated that crashing it here perhaps could save, more lives. हम थोड़ा आगे चलते हैं. I want to show you how this area looks. आप एक मिनट मेरे साथ आगे आइए. Just pan left and see how densely populated this entire area is. बहुत सारे लोग यहाँ रहते हैं, तो 1000 से 2000 की आबादी होगी यहाँ पे।
ज्यादा बहुत ज्यादा आबादी यहाँ पे। ये तो बहुत पुराना क्वार्टर्स है गुजरात गवर्नमेंट का, और यहाँ बहुत पब्लिक रहती है,
बहुत पब्लिक रहती है। So this is what the general area looks like, even while investigation is on as to what really led to the crash, whether it was a mechanical failure, whether it was a bird hit, or whether it was human error. The locals here are very thankful that their lives were saved. आपने एक बार, आखिरी बार आपसे पूछ रही हूँ, वो प्लेन उस तरफ से आया और आपको इस छत पे खड़े हुए लगा कि वो आप ही के सर पे क्रैश हो गया?
हाँ, हमारे सर पे, क्योंकि वो जब प्लेन आ रहा था एकदम इतनी हाइट थी, बस इतनी हाइट थी, और हम नीचे, हमको तो लगा कि भाई इधर गिर ही जाएगा, इधर ही गिर जाएगा, ऐसा फील हुआ था, और हमको तो बिल्कुल हिलने की जगह नहीं मिली। जैसे वहाँ ब्लास्ट हुआ है, मैं और मेरी वाइफ, क्योंकि मेरे बच्चे भी नीचे थे घर में, मैं और मेरी वाइफ तुरंत नीचे भागे, और मेरी वाइफ तो रोने लगी, हम भागे और बच्चे लेकर हम बाहर आउटसाइड चले गए। फिर मेरी वाइफ को वहाँ छोड़ के मैं तुरंत अंदर पहुँचा। अंदर का मंजर देखा तो बहुत भयानक था।
क्या देखा आपने अंदर, बताएं?
और सारे स्टूडेंट एक तरफ बुरी तरह से घायल थे, और चीका चिल्लानी, कुत्ते भी जल गए थे, पंछी भी जल गए थे, उनको भी हिलने की जगह नहीं मिली थी।
It will take time to rebuild the residential quarters of the BJ Medical College, but even more difficult will be to rebuild lives of orphaned children, widowed spouses, bereaved parents, families torn apart. The last rites of the mortal remains will give these families, the victims, some sense of closure. But the real answer that they are seeking is, why did this crash happen? Was it just an accident, unavoidable because of circumstances? Or did this happen because of criminal negligence? The focus will be on the various investigation teams that have now been formulated to look for answers. As we continue to keep our focus on the Ahmedabad crash, one of the worst crashes in the aviation history, the other news also continues here on CNN News 18. Thanks for watching.
Viewers, tonight we cut through the reams of carefully spun disinformation because the facts matter. And on this show, the hard facts speak for themselves. For the last few weeks, after India temporarily halted kinetic action against Pakistan, the Congress and its ecosystem have been claiming that Prime Minister Modi is subservient to the United States President Trump. That Prime Minister Modi folds in the face of Trump's pressure. But what we heard today from